We are now squarely going into the second major phase of AI. Now what you're starting to see is these agents that are going to conduct tasks and jobs almost fully autonomously for us. What's the core characteristic of a model? It's non-deterministic. What does that mean? It's unpredictable, which means that if you ask a question of a model a few times, you're going to get a slightly different answer. It's going to be a variant. Learning to learn is the biggest skill that you can have right now. And you have to get out of your mental model the constraint and the baggage that experience brings. One of the things that we should all be asking ourselves is, what are the constraints and things that are impediments that hold AI back? And I think there are three: infrastructure, trust, and...
Hey, this is Carlos's AI voice, CEO at Product School and your host on the Product Podcast. This episode was recorded live at ProductCon San Francisco, the AI conference for product leaders. Today's guest is Jeetu Patel, President and CPO at Cisco, a company with $56.7 billion in annual revenue, serving over 136,000 companies worldwide. Cisco is at the forefront of the AI revolution, pioneering innovations that help businesses scale while ensuring security and trust. In this episode, we will cover Cisco's unique approach to AI and the integration of AI in their products to drive faster, smarter decision-making, the role of security in AI-driven products, and why trust is now a prerequisite for productivity, how Cisco's recent $28 billion acquisition of Splunk is creating a unified open ecosystem for product teams, the organizational shifts necessary to build AI-first products and drive cross-functional collaboration. And finally, we will talk about what product leaders need to understand about the future of AI, the importance of data, and how to prepare your team for the AI era. Let's dive in.
Jeetu, you are
Right.
You are
Feels
back.
like I was here just an hour ago, and it was a year ago.
It was a year ago, and you're back by popular demand.
I'm back by popular demand. Well,
Not by
make sure I don't disappoint.
YouTube's demand. They had to take down the video. We had to re-upload it based on all the cursing that happened. But other than that, people loved it.
That's a false accusation. I never fucking curse.
So you started partnering with us, supporting the community way back, even before you were at Cisco. You were the CPO at Box back in the day. And this is your 5th appearance, which makes me
Wow,
proud.
is it the 5th one?
Yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you for having me and tolerating me.
You know what's funny? Every single time you get a new title / promotion, don't want to take any credit, but like now you are the president and CPO at Cisco.
They
What
give
does that
these
mean?
jobs to anyone these days, man. It's like, you know.
What does president and CPO at Cisco, how is that different than your previous role?
So we used to operate much more like a holding company in the past, where you'd have divisional GMs. So I used to run the security and collab business. There was a partner in crime that used to run the networking business. There was someone that ran the observability business, someone that ran the Splunk business. And the challenge that we had with that was, there was our breadth was not being used as an asset. It was a liability, because these things weren't kind of joined together. And so what we did with a year ago was Chuck Robbins, our CEO, decided that we need to make sure that we combine these together and truly create an integrated platform where the marginal cost of ingestion of technology goes down and you can create a compounding effect. So like very similar to like if you buy an Apple iPhone, you're not comparing the camera of the iPhone to the Google Pixel every single time. All you're doing is saying, okay, do I buy the 16, do I buy the 17 or wait until the 18? Why is that? Because you already have a bunch of other things that work in the ecosystem with Apple. And so what we wanted to do was do that same thing with one variant, which is loosely coupled, tightly integrated. So the entire portfolio works very well integrated together, but you don't have to buy it all together. We will also work with the open ecosystem. And if you do buy two things together, boy, they work like magic. And that integration required an organizational change, which was probably my biggest kind of learning, which is orgs matter, and this kind of notion of Conway's law where organizations ship their org charts is very true. And so you have to make sure that you organize based on the outcome you're looking for. And so don't organize for individual BUs if you want them to talk to each other. Create a platform effect and create a platform-based organization, which is what we've done. It's completely functional. We've got one person that they can blame now for all product. And so that's what we did.
I think around this time last year, you just had finalized the acquisition of Splunk, $28 billion. And I guess one of the challenges that comes with org design is when you are incorporating new businesses into your own org, like how do you go about like making sure that they're truly part of your ecosystem?
The way that I've always thought about this is when you acquire a company, you don't just acquire it for the technology. You actually have to really assess the culture and the culture fit. So if the culture isn't right and if the people aren't really with a common mission and a common purpose, I think these acquisitions tend to fail. And so we don't do that many big acquisitions for exactly that reason. With Splunk, we were lucky because a lot of the people in the Splunk team and our team on the leadership side had actually worked together in the past. So, like, when we did the transaction, like, people were asking each other about how their kids were doing because they had already worked with each other in the past. And so the integration was far, far simpler than what it would have been if they were complete strangers and they have to establish a level of trust. The trust was already established in this case.
So I want to talk about security, this concept that you've been using, security by design in products, especially in the age of AI. What do you mean by that?
Okay, so let's take a step back firstly. For everyone in product over here, you should know that this is the most exciting time that you could be alive in tech. Like, there's literally not a better time that could have been there, right? Because what is happening? We are now squarely going into the second major phase of AI. So the first phase was intelligent chatbots that answered questions that made it feel like magic. That's been going on for the past 2.5, 3 years. It'll be 3 years in November. And all of our lives have changed. Now what you're starting to see is these agents that are going to conduct tasks and jobs almost fully autonomously for us, right? And so as that happens, every assumption that society has made about almost every aspect of the tech stack changes. So for example, one of the things that we should all be asking ourselves is, what are the constraints and things that are impediments that hold AI back? And I think there are three. Right? The first one is there's going to be a massive infrastructure constraint. We don't have enough power, compute, or network capacity in the world to satiate the needs for AI. It just doesn't exist. Number two is there's a massive trust deficit, which means that if people don't trust these systems, they're not going to use them, right? And this is the first time that you're seeing that security and safety is not looked at odds with productivity. It's actually looked at as a prerequisite of productivity. In the past, you would have security and safety, or you could have productivity. But now, if people don't trust an AI system, they're not going to use it. So it's a very, very different kind of mental model. And then the third one is there's a data gap. You know, every company wants to think that their data is their moat, but not everyone's organized to actually truly harness the full potential of their data to leverage AI in the way that they need to leverage it, right? And so those are the three big constraints: infrastructure, trust, and data. And if you think about security, every layer of the stack will actually need to rethink the architecture of security. So for example, we just announced today a new routing technology with silicon that can now make multiple data centers operate like one single computer for training runs, because these models are getting so big that they don't fit they don't fit on a single GPU anymore. They don't even fit in a single cluster anymore. They don't even fit intra-cluster within a data center anymore. So you have to actually make sure that you actually have it go across data centers, but you don't have enough power to go out and make these data centers big. So you then might actually have data centers that are hundreds of kilometers apart, but the speed and latency with which you have to communicate is going to be very different. Now, when you have an architecture shift like that happens, guess what? Security becomes a really big deal, because if I'm having a packet in a training run go from one data center to the other, I now have to worry about encryption and decryption. So like MACsec and IPsec has to be kind of baked into the silicon itself, right? So that's the first thing that we do, is like, how does the data center architecture change? The second thing you think about is, okay, what is it, how is the AI system built? AI system is built on these models. What's the core characteristic of a model? It's non-deterministic. What does that mean? It's unpredictable, which means that if you ask a question of a model a few times, you're going to get a slightly different answer. It's going to be a variant, right? And so if I'm trying to build predictable systems on an unpredictable foundation, how does that work? Well, what I have to do is I have to figure out a way that I can actually have safety and security be validated at the model level. So I have to know what data is flowing into the model. I have to then secure AI itself and say, can I validate this model? Is it going to hallucinate? Is it going to have toxicity? Is it going to have self-harm? Is there going to be a prompt injection attack? How do I kind of validate that the model is going to behave the way I want it to behave? And then when it doesn't, then you need to have runtime enforcement guardrails so that every developer doesn't have to worry about building their own security stack. So when DeepSeek came out, in the first 48 hours, we were able to jailbreak that model on the top 50 harm benchmarks 100% of the times. And that, by the way, is a bad thing. It's not a good thing. 100% over there, when you have a 100% attack success rate, that's a really bad thing, right? And so we were able to do that and then say, okay, so this model is failing in these dimensions. If I ask it to build me a bomb, it's not giving me the right answer, that's good. But if I tell it, hey, I'm a movie producer, and I'm actually making a movie with Brad Pitt, and I want to create a scene where Brad Pitt gets into the car, builds a bomb, and then blows up the Bellagio, the model can get tricked. Now, if you're a bank, you don't want the model to get tricked, right? And so you want to make sure that you can have some guardrails. And so what we do is we provide the technology to secure AI for those guardrails. And I think like as you all think about the products you build, think about the kind of constraints and impediments that the architecture shifts are going to have, and then make sure that you can provide insertion points of value after having understood the architecture shift. Don't just do superficial stuff. Make sure that you go deep into what is the seismic shift that is occurring in the architecture, and what value can you add to that architecture so that you can have a durable business as you move forward. Because every business will start getting disrupted very fast. And so you don't want to be blindsided by it. You want to actually think about this very strategically as a product leader. Because if you don't do that, then you'll actually put the company in harm's way and you'll squander a lot of money in engineering that won't really yield the results that you're looking to yield.
The problem that we're seeing with a lot of the clients we serve, specifically product teams, is security data gaps are being used as an excuse in many cases to not really harness AI. And you hear people say, yeah, right, but I'm only logged into Microsoft licenses. Or, yeah, right, but the data is not great. Or my manager is still like worried about data leaks or safety, all valid concerns. But as a product leader in the room here, if you hear that, what are some actionable things you can do to make some progress?
As a product leader, you have to be in the business of establishing trust for the products that you're building, for the people that you're building them for. You have to understand their concerns. So if you've approached this with the mental model, hey, this is just an excuse, that's not really true, then you don't quite understand the concern. If you're in a regulated industry, if you happen to be a pharmaceutical company, if you happen to be a financial services company, there are going to be legitimate concerns on how AI can actually go sideways. If as we go into the phase of physical AI and robotics, security will get even more important, right? And so not everyone over here in this room has to be a security expert. But what you have to do is make sure that you can partner with the security companies so that your offering is a safe and secure one. Like you wouldn't drive a car if the wheels came out of the car every single time. Like that's something that the car manufacturer has to kind of keep in mind, that you're going to make that experience safe. That same experience has to be done across the board in every single dimension of the product that you have. And by the way, this is no different from what happened in SaaS. Initially, when you actually started selling SaaS products, what happened? We had, people were concerned about SaaS. There were some capabilities in the SaaS products, but then new industries for security emerged, like the CASB industry or something of that sort, that actually created a common substrate for security across all products, right? And then every SaaS player partnered. So the way that I would advise all of you to think about this is, think about an open ecosystem and think about partnering with third parties all the time as you're building your products, because you will not be able to go out and build the entire stack by yourself at the speed that you're expected to do it. So you have to make sure that you actually have an open ecosystem and partner up with the companies that make your product a durable, viable, and trusted entity in the market.
I think that other point about making your data, like integrating your product with others, especially now as we are in the era of MCPs and others.
Even if it's a competitor, by the way.
Yes. And
that's a really important piece, because most people will be like, oh, this is a competitor, I'm not going to integrate with them. Stop thinking zero sum. You know, we've integrated with Microsoft, we just integrated with Zoom, we integrate and take data telemetry from Palo Alto Networks, from CrowdStrike. Why is that? Because if you truly believe that the customer is at the center and you're going to work backwards from the customer's requirements, then going out and creating a walled garden is exactly the wrong approach to take. Protect the customer's investment by keeping the customer's lens on all the time, and then work backwards from there. And if you do that, you will actually build a delightful product, and you will earn the customer's loyalty, where over time they might give you more and more. But if you try to say you have to buy everything from me, that's why it was so important that one of our key principles was loosely coupled, tightly integrated. You don't have to buy everything from us, but boy, when you do buy two things together, they work like magic. And so that's what you have to keep doing.
So on that note, I mean, 2 days ago you were at the Open Day, Dev Day. As you think about the hyperscalers and the opportunity to partner as well as compete, like, how are you playing that arena?
So we are lucky in the sense that we are playing in every layer of the stack. We build our own silicon. We build our own hardware. We build our own operating system. We have our own security platform. We have our own data platform. We have our own observability platform, and we have our own applications. So we happen to have the entire stack. Most startups are not going to have the entire stack. But even in a company like ours that has the entire stack, the goal is not to go out and exclude others. The goal is to make sure that you actually partner with other people. So we partner with NVIDIA. We partner with AMD. We're going to partner with, any of the third parties, because what you want to do is you want to make sure that you open up the ecosystem. Because right now, frankly, it's very hard to predict where the cards are going to fall. And you have to make sure that you have a lot of options open for you, right? Like if you look at the OpenAI Dev Day that Sam and team presented, it was probably one of the best developer conference keynotes that I have seen. Why was it so good? Because it was very clear on the role that they were playing and the role that they were actually going to play of the ecosystem with them. And by the way, when you play that role with the ecosystem has to actually make a calculus. If I don't get integrated into something that's becoming a platform, then I might actually be left out. And so if you're a product leader and you're building a SaaS application, you better figure out a way that actually gets surfaced up in ChatGPT, because now ChatGPT is going to have everything, and that becomes one of the standard interfaces. So if you don't understand the macro trends, then the strategic decisions you'll make won't necessarily be ones that actually give you the leapfrog advantage and a step function advantage. So you have to understand the macro trends at a pretty deep level.
In startups, I mean, by nature, you have to have focus. You're constrained by so many different lack of resources. Obviously, there's never unlimited resources, but still, like when you are operating at your scale at Cisco and you are playing across all different layers of the stack, how do you keep a finger on the pulse in terms of all the different things that are happening?
I think it's easier now to learn than ever before. I'm sure all of you would agree. Like the pace of, learning to learn is the biggest skill that you can have right now. And you have to get out of your mental model the constraint and the baggage that experience brings. Like, don't question your experience and saying, I don't have enough experience in this area and therefore I don't know what's going on. Just learn it. And I'll give you a story. When I was taking over this job, Chuck Robbins, my boss, said, "Hey, Jeetu, you know nothing about networking. We're going to give you a $60 billion business. You know nothing about networking. How are you going to do it?" I'm like, "Well, I knew nothing about security and I knew nothing about video when I joined Cisco." Like, if you constrain yourself by what you know, I think you'll hold yourself back. Constrain yourself by your areas of genuine interest and go to the places where you actually are very good at something that you love doing, right? And then make sure that you're learning it all. Like one of the first things I did for the first 12 months I was in this job is every single day I'd get briefs, because $60 billion business, there's like thousands of products, everyone's coming and giving you, different briefs on it. So what I would do is I would write down things that I didn't understand. And every night for 3 hours, it was me and an AI engine, and I'd use all three of them. And I would actually just make sure that I got to a base level of dexterity. Because I think there'll only be like two kinds of companies in the world. There's going to be companies that are very dexterous with the use of AI, and then there are going to be companies that will really struggle for relevance. And I think the people are going to be the same way. So don't constrain yourself with what experience you have. In fact, I think sometimes hiring for experience is a bad thing, because what ends up happening is you get this false sense of conviction where you're like, well, we tried this out 5 years ago, it didn't work. But like 50,000 variables changed from 5 years ago to now that you might want to think about things differently. So like, don't have experience hold you back. Like, yes, in certain areas it makes sense. Like, you don't want to have a surgery with an electrician. Bad idea, right? But in general, I think if you have people that are unconstrained in their thinking, and especially in product, you can ask questions that give you a very different kind of outcome, because you're not constrained in your thinking. You can actually have a very broad canvas that you can operate with. And so that would be the thing that I would encourage everyone to do, is don't let your experience constrain you, and have a mix in your teams of people that are very experienced, that understand pattern recognition, and people that are not at all experienced. Like, I spend a disproportionate of my time with student interns. You know why? Because I think I learn a lot from them. And the reason I learn a lot from them is they just approach things in a very different way at a time like this with a platform shift. If you go to someone who's 35 years old, even 30 years old, and you say, how do you use AI? It's very transactional. I'm going to use it as a search engine on steroids. If you go to a 20-year-old, they're thinking about it as a companion. They're brainstorming with it. They're like, hey, what do you think I should do today in this particular topic area? And they'll kind of go back and forth. That's a very different way to approach using a technology as a companion. And I think it's very hard to understand that pattern unless you spend time with the people that are teaching you all the time in different modalities of operation. And so don't over-index on experience, and don't penalize people that don't have experience. On the other hand, don't think that experience is not at all valuable either. You need to have some experience in certain areas, but when you mix the two together, magic starts happening.
I resonate with that, Jeetu, because for the first time ever in my life, when AI started to become more mainstream, I felt that I was not that cool anymore. Coming from the startup world. And
Carlos is pretty cool, don't you think?
I was going for that. But that was such a trigger for me to realize there is another generation of people who operate in a different way. And my reaction to that was, I'm going to figure this out. Like, I obsessed over that, and I went deep to really make sure that I can honor some of the things that have worked with me in the past while also reinvent others. Bringing that back to you, I mean, you've been very active on social, and not only social, I've seen you in the media. I was like, sometimes, hey, that's my buddy, Jeetu. Talking about AI, people, change management. And obviously for people who have that hustle, who are also in the right location, who have resources, I hope most of them really go for it. But like, when you're talking with a much larger group of population, even within Cisco, right? Like, what is that right balance? At what point you also be like, you know what? It's just not worth to keep investing in that, because that's slowing everybody else down.
Look, I think most people come into work wanting to do a good job. And so I think, like, 90% of the time when something's not working, it's a leadership issue, right? So you have to know that. Like, look in the mirror first if you're a leader yourself before knowing whether something's actually there. Now, by the way, there's a couple of things to keep in mind. Number one, a lot of people right now are having the wrong conversation. So the lowest level of maturity is when people start worrying about AI is going to take my job. That's maturity level number one in my mind. Maturity level number two is AI is not going to take my job, but someone using AI better than me probably will take my job. That's maturity level two. Maturity level three is when you realize, I don't think I'm going to be able to do my job without AI, right? And then when you get to the maturity level three, you start asking yourself, like, are you being clear? Like, one of the things that I tend to do is I tend to be very direct with people on where they stand, and I tend to be very direct about what the expectations are. So one time, there was someone that in an all-hands meeting, we had like 75,000 people asked a question saying, do we have room to be skeptical about AI at Cisco? And my answer was absolutely not. If you feel like you're questioning whether AI is a thing or not, this is the wrong place for you. Like, go somewhere else. Because what you can have happen when you have 95,000 employees is people kind of second guessing every single thing that you're doing. You have to be very clear. You might be wrong, but you can't be confused. You have to be very clear about the way that you're going to go. And that direction, actually people take cue from you on the direction you're going to have. So you need to make sure that you place a bet. And you have to have very strong opinions that are loosely held that you can change based on certain kind of dynamics that might occur in the industry, but you have to be very clear. So one of the things I've learned is never fight a megatrend, always use it as a tailwind. But know the difference between a megatrend and a hype cycle. AI is a megatrend. You want to always use it as a tailwind. You don't want to be fighting it. But knowing the difference between that and a hype cycle is really important. So a hype cycle would have been like Web 2.0. I could never make heads or tails out of that. You needed a PhD to even understand the use case. When you saw ChatGPT the first time, it's like, yeah, this is very clear what needs to happen, right? And so you need to understand the megatrend, but as a company, understand the trend and then figure out a way that you can accommodate your business model and your value to the trend so that the trend propels you forward rather than pushing you back. And that, I think, is a very important dynamic to keep in mind as you build up organizations and scale them. Otherwise, what ends up happening is, right now, for example, I'll give you one very clear thing. In the architecture of AI, the model and the product, the distance between the model and the product, the greater the distance, the weaker the product. The closer the distance, the better the product gets created, right? And what does that mean? That means the model and the product have to have a feedback loop where the model is the product and you're actually changing the model on a regular basis because that changes the behavior of the product. That's an architectural shift that you have to think about. And so if you start to just put a thin wrapper around a model and say, that's my business, that wrapper will be subsumed in the model in 3 months. And your business won't be a business. It was a feature that was very short-lived. So knowing the difference between building a company and building a product and building a feature is really important. And a feature that is short-lived is the worst kind of feature because all you're doing is chasing different things and it feels very frenetic. So you want to make sure that you take long-term bets with short-term successes along the way. And if you can do that right, then you can start to see meaningful escape velocity happen in the companies that you're in. Like the law of large numbers doesn't work anymore. Like if you look at companies like Anthropic, right? I mean, 100 million year one, 1 billion in year two, and they're on track for 10 billion in year three. That's like a very, very accelerated rate of growth. And that's because what they've done is they've actually really focused on get the model very tied to the product and don't have those be two things that are completely separate. Now, what happens if you're not a model company? You got to make sure that you have enough dexterity on the model and the fine-tuning and the post-training that needs to be done in the model so that that doesn't actually become an impediment for you.
We're going to leave it here. Jeetu, thank you so much.
Thanks so much.